Right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Rethinking Remote Lesson Planning for Arts Education. This session is part of the DPI Arts Education team's Making Lemonade series. Just a quick note that we will be recording this webinar and posting it to our webinar archive. You can click on the link to the bit.ly that we are sharing in the chat. I believe I just posted that, but it's also at the bottom of the slide deck here. To follow along with the slides and access later if you wish. We will be recording these and it will be all on our webinar archive, like I said, that you can access at a later time if you need to. Please take a moment to notice the graphics on the next page here, Brandon, that are clickable links for you to find our Google site homepage. So if you click on that little splash on the bottom right-hand side, that'll take you right to our Google site homepage. This page contains updates and links to register for any upcoming webinars, our webinar archive of recordings of our previous webinars, and a page devoted to remote learning resources. There's also many other resources that you may find helpful in planning and implementation for this year. You can also sign up for our listserv to receive our newsletters in your email and follow along on our Facebook page for updates as well. Those links were also shared earlier in the chat that you can also look at. All right, next slide. I'd like to take a moment to introduce ourselves to you. My name is Sayward Grindley. I am the Dance and Visual Arts Consultant for DPI. I just started in this position at the end of May, and I've been thrilled to join this wonderful arts education team. I transitioned to this role from teaching dance and dance education in the college setting, where I was also teaching future educators. I do have experience teaching in the public schools before that, and then most recently with virtual and remote teaching, just like you all, as I was also thrown into that role last semester. I have personal experience with online classes as a student in my graduate classes. And so I try to take those previous experiences to think about ways to best help you and get you the resources that you need. So please feel free to reach out if you need anything or want to brainstorm ideas or solutions for your own classes. I'd now love to introduce my arts education team member, Brandon, and he's going to introduce himself to you.
Thank you so much, Sayward. I am your K-12 music and theater arts consultant. I spent 10 years in the music classroom teaching pretty much every subject. And then I went and did my graduate studies in curriculum and instruction. So I have a passion for not just the content, but the way in which we can best deliver that. And so we are thrilled to be here today with someone else who loves curriculum and instruction just as much as me.
Thank you, Brandon. I'd like to now also introduce our fearless leader and section chief for social studies and arts education, Dr. Lori Major Carlin. And she's unable to be here with us today. However, I do want to let you all know that she is really leading the way for us in so many ways. Lori is a previous theater arts educator and a researcher in the field and brings a wealth of knowledge and encouragement to our team. She firmly believes in staying solutions focused and leads the way with that mindset for all of us. And we thank her for her leadership and guidance. Lastly, we are very excited to introduce our guest speaker for today, instructional coach and former music and dance educator, Felicia Davis. She's going to tell you a little bit about herself.
Hi, everybody. I think it's interesting that there are caps on. I have such a really Southern accent that there is no telling what the captions are going to look like while I'm talking. But I'm at school today at Mooresville Middle School, where I have been teaching in Mooresville for 22 years, and I just finished my 30th year of education, and I'm excited to be here with you today. I love the merge of arts education and curriculum and instruction that I've been able to be a part of in Mooresville, and I'm thrilled to share that with you today. But I want you to remember, I'm no expert at everything. I just want to share resources that I think are really going to be helpful to you as you start this new kind of school year.
Thank you so much, Felicia. Just a few housekeeping reminders that today's session is DPI facilitated. We do encourage your video, but it is not required. Feel free to use the chat for any questions, thoughts, or ideas, but we try to stay on topic. Brandon or I will respond to the chat, and please also let us know if you're having any technical issues that we can try to help you with. While we know everyone is eager to plan and figure out everything for this year, we try to keep the discussion solutions focused or with a growth mindset that we encourage all of our students to have as well. Please remember to stay muted so that we do not get any background noise and we can all hear the presentation. We do have on closed captioning to help you follow along, but if for any reason you cannot hear or get your sound to work, remember that we are recording and you can always go back and watch the recording for anything you've missed. If we notice that you may have accidentally unmuted, we may send you a little gentle note to let you know and remind you. Take a look at the next screen here and notice the features on your Webex program, which is our state mandated program to use for webinars. You'll notice where you can mute, you can find the chat box, and where you can change your view layout. Today, we will give you a brief overview of arts education in North Carolina, some general reminders of remote learning best practices, which may be review, but also great reminders for us. And then we'll move on quickly to part 3, which is the main content of the session. We'll finish with a closure where you will be given a link to a survey to complete for your certificate. You want to make sure that you fill out that survey in order to get your certificate for credit for today's session. One more reminder that you can access the slide deck and follow along with the bit.ly at the bottom of your screen. Today's webinar goals are to gain confidence in teaching the North Carolina Essential Standards for Arts Ed remotely, get ideas for creating engaging lessons, and add resources to your toolbox for blended or virtual instruction. If today's goals do not meet your needs or you just really are craving more, please check out our future webinars. Later this week, we have self-regulated learners, which is both SEL and remote learning focused with specific music examples. Next week, we will focus on using Google Classroom and innovative ways of teaching dance and visual arts virtually. All of these webinars should be applicable to any of the arts educators, so find ones that are just interesting to you and you can definitely get information that you can apply to your teaching. All of these webinars will be archived on our website, so make sure that you take a look back at them at a later time if you miss any. Additionally, our partners at NCDA have put together a virtual conference series that frankly looks amazing. Make sure that you check out their conference. There are options for both members and non-members to attend. And then NCMEA starts their free technology resources webinar this next week. They are specifically tailored to music educators, and they're open to all teachers who might find the content useful. Check out their website for more details. And also Felicia, you'll notice, is teaching 2 of those sessions. So she'll go into more content specific details about music lesson plans, and I believe that is tomorrow. And then she has another one focusing on Flipgrid, I believe. The North Carolina Art Education Association is hosting a discussion on teaching in COVID-19 that you can register through this link. And on the next page, there's a little bit more information about that discussion for you to come back to at a later time. All right, I'm going to hand things over to Brandon now.
Thank you so much, Sayward. I just want to re-emphasize the fact that this slide deck is really, really robust, and we will be moving very quickly through the next 2 sections. And if you feel like you'd like to go back through them more thoroughly at a later time, you can do that by going back and visiting this bit.ly down at the bottom of the page. I think it's really important to remember that we're stronger together as we face this fall, and that we, even though we are often the only educator who teaches our subject in our building or in our district, or maybe these days in our neighborhood, we are not alone. So North Carolina Public Schools serves 1.55 million public school students in 2,500 public schools across 386 different public school units. And in those 2,500 public schools, there are 7,026 teachers teaching the 4 arts areas. Now, though the North Carolina General Assembly lawmakers create the laws and the School Board of Education makes the policies that affect your job, it is actually the role of DPI to create instructional resources to help you implement those laws and those policies to help you succeed in teaching your students. So Sayward and I do not make any decisions regarding remote instruction or anything, any funding, none of that comes from us. We're here to help you through any decisions, especially since we're a local control state and most decisions are actually made by your local school board. This series was directly created in response to the decisions that were made above our pay grade in order to help you be successful in your class. But remember that you are not alone in this. We are really excited, though, about the law that was just created to require 1 arts credit for graduation for all students starting or who are entering in grade 6 in the year 2022. In North Carolina, we teach within the Comprehensive Arts Education Framework, and the 3 components of the CAE are independent and were found by the Comprehensive Arts Education Task Force in 2010 to be completely necessary. Arts education, arts integration, and art exposure are 3 sections that are essential for arts educators to look for opportunities within the community and within their school. So we just want to talk a little bit about remote learning. Anybody who's feeling apprehensive about remote learning, whether you're in the blended learning environment or in the completely remote learning environment, whether it's your 13th year or your 30th, this may feel like your first all over again. And the content of today's webinar speaks directly to that. We need to revisit the excitation and the energy that we had and all of that knowledge that we were ready to apply when we had that first teaching assignment, and still embrace the apprehension and uneasiness. And we can still make amazing standards-aligned, lessons purposefully, thrive as educators, and ensure that our students come out on top. This is not a public education crisis. It is a public health crisis. So though our instruction was not built to be online this past spring, now we have the time to be intentional and create frameworks and structures to make sure that our students are successful this fall. One such framework that is fantastic comes from DPI and the Friday Institute. It was published last spring, but unfortunately a lot of teachers who needed it maybe didn't have or were not aware of it. These 7 principles include SEL and how to equitably modify traditional classroom structures and procedures for the online environment while still aligning content to the standards. If you're not intimately familiar with this yet, I highly recommend visiting these links so that you can build your fall courses upon this framework. Not necessarily the time to only try to reproduce what you have been doing in the past in an online environment. There are no standards that demand judged performances or singing together across Zoom, black box performances, or even halftime shows. It's time to rethink how we can improve our students' artistry in ways that we haven't yet done. How can we educate them as a whole musician, a whole dancer, a whole artist, and a whole thespian on this platform? How does teaching them to appreciate those new genres, history, and current art add to their toolbox so that when we go back to the traditional brick and mortar building, they can be even more successful? You will have time to rehearse and to create galleries later in the year. So what tools can you give them now that will make them more successful later? Very quickly, just want to share one such tool. The Teaching North Carolina Arts Project was something that we began actually in this past fall, specifically to address standards in grades 4 and 8 about teaching North Carolina arts. And so we've been partnering with other state organizations to bring together resources, and it just happens to be on an online platform that's incredibly friendly for any online or blended instruction that you might use. When addressing materials or lack thereof for art making, please involve your students in the problem-solving process. Introduce the creative design process to them and have them work through those challenges that you are facing under your guidance and have them solve these artistic problems. This time will probably not only include art making. Trying to solve those problems is just as important in the artistic process. Remember that our attitudes and our language affect our students. If you are positive, excited, and energetic about this new modus of learning and focus on the other areas of your art form, your students will too. If you're negative and frustrated, so will your students. Now, without any further ado, let's welcome Felicia Davis from Mooresville Middle School to talk to us more about remote lesson planning.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so excited to be with you here today and excited for this opportunity, the way Brandon just laid it out. As frustrating as this time has been, I think we all became teachers because every day was different. Our students were different animals every day. They're different personalities. We are different every day. And teaching is never the same, typically. We never just walk into each school year and everything remain the same. So this change that we have in education right now really is and can be made very exciting for us to be able to do those things with students that we've not been able to do before because of time commitments and other stuff. So I urge you to embrace this creativity that's been given to us. Look at it as an opportunity to be even more creative than you already are. Students are resilient and so are we. So let's hopefully use the resources that I share with you today to help you in crafting those plans and those exciting things that you're going to come up with your kids, no matter what we do the rest of the school year. And hopefully we're not going to be like this forever. This is going to be, you know, this too will pass. So we will push through. So I think of lesson planning not as a chore as much as something to be relied upon to help me make sure I'm doing the best I can in my classroom. I believe that as great as the educators were for me when I was in college, the way lesson plans were laid out in the 80s, yes, I graduated in the 80s, they were very extensive and very lengthy. And then I started teaching in a time when there were a lot of things changing, and now I can look back and go, every time we changed something or had a new idea in education, it seemed to just have a different name, and it was really like something we had done before. Sometimes we wrap up some of these concepts, and sometimes they're a new thing that kind of disappears quickly, and sometimes it's things that if we just stick to those concepts, our lessons can always be very robust. So I think of it like a recipe. And this is kind of probably simple, but it makes sense to me. I use food a lot with my band students as examples, and maybe because I like to eat and I'm a foodie. But if you think about it, I can make a whole lot of recipes from memory that were passed down from my grandmother, my mother, my aunts. I really should go back to the recipe and make sure that I have the measurements correct, because sometimes when I try to do it by memory, it doesn't turn out exactly the same way. I also believe that all the very important events like surgery, having dental work done, having a lawyer fight for you in a court situation, all of those people have some type of notes and research and planning that they have done to make sure they do the absolute best job. And that's why I feel like a lesson plan shouldn't be looked at as a chore or requirement as much as it's great for us to be able to teach our very best every day. Next slide. I do want to say that I've put a lot of stuff in some of these slides, so I don't want it to overwhelm you. You will have this to look back at later, and then you can go through a lot of the links with more detail. So we're going to go through some today with some suggestions, and then you have a lot more that you can go back and revisit. The first thing is that we need to make a plan. I ask students all the time when they are frustrated or something's not working, or I can't believe I played so poorly on that playing test, and now I'm, you know, down at the end of my section and they're freaking out. And I would say, well, what's your plan to get better? You need a plan. Do you have a practice plan, or do you just go sit in your room and just play line by line out of the book? Or do you break it down and into smaller pieces and rehearse correctly? We teach kids how to understand the concepts of each of our performing arts and visual arts by breaking things down into steps. So do that as part of your lesson. So I do recommend, now that we've been online, and in Mooresville, we've been online since 2007, and I am on my third LMS, and we're now in Canvas. And we also used Google Classroom some for a while. I know what it's like to lose materials digitally. And it's, you know, certainly if you lose them, you can recreate them and now they'll be even better. Suggest that you maybe pick a cloud-based program to do a lot of your, house a lot of your links and your resources, and then use the LMS to bring that stuff in and deliver it for students. And I say that just simply because I've lost stuff and I've watched teachers lose their materials when PowerSchool synced and their course was no longer there. So try to make sure that you are housing your stuff in a place that you can get back to it, and then build everything in your LMS. What I have on this slide are 2 sample music curriculum maps, and we're going to look at number 1. It's extensive and it could be overwhelming, but I still think it was a really great model that a teacher shared with me. So she took all of her standards and placed them in this spreadsheet, and then went month by month. So she created her August template, just copied it to each month, and then she would insert what she was doing with her students. And she was teaching band, general music, and she was also teaching a study skills class at her school. So she felt like she needed to be this organized to make sure she understood what the kids got out of their lessons and what she might need to change next time. But this is a whole curriculum map. So it might be something that you would be interested in using. This is 3 years old, so you will see what it looked like for a middle school teacher at that point. But what you might want to do is get ideas from it of how you could lay out your year. Now, for me, in my district right now, we're going to lay out the next 9 weeks, because we are now going virtual for 9 weeks for sure. So most teachers are going to plan that 9 weeks and be probably thinking ahead to what might happen if we switch to plan B, or if we stay in C for the second quarter. So, but this might be able to help you if you want to lay out your yearly plan. Even if you don't put in as much detail, it's nice to look at your standards and your year and measure out how you think everything should be laid out throughout your curriculum. So on the next slide, I have some smaller lesson planning templates. So in my district, we talk a lot about the 5 E's instructional model, and the 5 E's instructional model is highlighted, and that is a link that you can click on and read about the instructional model. It was actually made in the 80s, which I think is wonderful, because I think everything about the 80s was but it's a model that people are still using. And what I like about it are the words themselves. Like sometimes I need to be reminded that using a word like explore helps me lead to certain activities in my lessons. So what I've done on the left in these links, we have 2 lesson planners that are based on the 5 E's. And we're going to look at the first one. So number 1, uses all of the E words and then talks about what does this look like and what could I use, what type of tools. So you can look at each of the categories and see if you use these as part of your lesson planning, then what does it look like, what tools might you use, and how could you possibly adapt it. You could also make a copy of this and use it as a lesson plan template. And the number 2 version is an empty planner that you could also use as well. So all of these links, you can make a copy and it will be in your Google Drive, and then you can edit them however you would like. The sample weekly schedule planner, I really like this for something that you could create in your Google Drive or adapt, and then you could give it to students. So I used what our Plan B in my district was supposed to look like had we gone Plan B. So we would have had our students divided into thirds at the secondary level, and we would see one group Monday, one group Wednesday, one group Friday, and then all of the groups had their online classwork. So what I did was I made this as if one of our teachers would be using it for Plan B. And what it would be is something that we could put in Canvas and show our students, this is what the week looks like. And it would remind them which, if they understand which cohort they are in, then they could follow when they're online synchronously with their teacher, when they would be doing asynchronous work, and then the other activities that the teacher expects them to do. So I'm also a visual person. So sometimes I think color coding and putting things in blocks and squares and using different fonts sometimes makes things a little more visual for students. So this might be a lesson planner that would work for you to make for your weekly and then embed in your LMS or your Google Classroom or your website, whatever you're using to deliver content to your students. Some of the things that are in here, I tried to adapt mostly to the different subjects that we all are teaching in the arts. So the other options that I have, if you'll go back, Brandon, sorry. The other options that are on this slide are a Flipgrid lesson planner, which is just a way to decide if you're going to flip a lesson. It's just a planner that is already set up for you to put in all the different items that you might have within a flipped lesson. The digital stations planner is one that I recommend. I think that all music teachers could do stations of some type. And some of you do stations without realizing you're doing stations. So, I mean, every time we've ever had sectionals, that was some type of station as well. So think about the things that you can do with your students virtually in asynchronous work with digital centers that might be able to engage them in some activities that they don't normally get to do in class, while still doing some of the great work that you would have done with them face-to-face. And then the last two planners are things that were shared with me by other teachers that are two different templates that include these words: read, write, listen, watch. It's just a way to decide how would you do different digital stations or different sections to your virtual work. So if you wanted to do something like this while you're teaching kids synchronously, don't think you need to talk the entire time you're meeting with them. You can give them time and say, you're going to read this article. This is me giving you 9 minutes, and I'm going to set a timer for you to read the article, and then we're going to discuss afterwards. So and I just use that as the first option since it was read, but anything you want to do with your students, you can do with them live in a meeting. They can work while you are sitting there observing them. So those first two slides have the curriculum map and some different lesson planners that I think would be hopefully helpful to you, and you can make copies of all of those. And if for any reason you have trouble making a copy or need another version of it, you can certainly email me. So the next thing I want to talk about in building your plan are elements to include in your lessons. And these are suggestions and ideas for what you might include in a 30-minute, 45-minute, 60-minute time frame that you have with students, as well as what you can do with them in asynchronous lessons. So I would start with interactivity and hands-on activities. Now, that seems like it's harder when we're in a meeting with them virtually, but you can talk them through what they're doing. The visual art teacher at my school is fabulous, and I got to observe her doing some really incredible instruction in Google Meet, which is what we've been using at our middle school during Q4. And I was amazed at how her students were so involved, and we could see them drawing, and they would pull up their artwork and show it to her and share it with the rest of the class on the video. So you can still have that interactive hands-on moment within class, even when it's in these funky meeting situations. What I've used there are some words. I'm also a word person, so I depend on things like Bloom's Taxonomy Digital Verbs, which I think is a great resource to help you. What you're wanting, think about what you want your kids to be able to accomplish, and then how do you get to that in your lesson planning by doing these things. So we're going to look real quick at the Taxonomy Digital Verbs, and most of us are pretty familiar and understand Bloom's revised taxonomy. And this is just simply a list of all the verbs. And so when you're looking at each of these sections, you'll be able to see that there's a lot of this we as arts educators do already, because I think our subject areas are more interactive than, you know, a lot of the core subjects. Brandon, if it doesn't come through, that's fine. We can talk through it.
I think because I'm trying to live stream to Facebook at the same time, like my entire bandwidth is being used.
That is true. So just quickly, this is each of the words and all the verbs that go in between it. So, you know, we tend to, as arts teachers, stay in the creating side a lot anyway, and that's natural for us. But I give you this so that you can use it as a resource as you're lesson planning. Each lesson that you're doing, what are all the areas of Bloom's that you can cover within your lessons? And it comes from Teach Thought, this particular graphic. And so I linked the article in there as well, or the blog. And Teach Thought is a great place for resources like this. So I'm not going to ask Brandon to click on the next thing. I just want to tell you, I find that all of us educators can really find exciting projects and ideas for our classes in places that they aren't normally, because there's way more blogs for general education than there are for us in the arts. But I happen to be looking for a lot of dance resources this past week because I noticed there weren't as many as I could find with the other arts. So I started looking at dance companies' websites to see what their education outreach might have. And on the Martha Graham website, which I in college adored anything Martha Graham because it was my first experience with her style of dance. So when I went to their website, they had this great Instagram project called 19 Poses. They took 19 poses of Martha Graham and they challenged people to recreate the poses and post them on Instagram. So that to me is a lesson plan right there for a dance teacher. What a great way to incorporate students learning the history of Martha Graham and her dance and all of the incredible dances that she made that they can still go watch, which are on her website, by the way, and their YouTube channel. But this was so interesting to me that you could take a picture and then make a pose out of it. So I automatically think, well, how can an artist take something and have students recreate, and then they do a side by side? And how can we do this in theater? And how can we do music as well? Maybe not with a picture, but you recreate something else. So that's what I mean by going to all these places, all these resources we have online, and finding ways to incorporate something that you see done in a completely different way, but you can incorporate it into a lesson in your subject area. I also think that using social media for our students nowadays is a positive. When we can use it in a creative way and show them the appropriate use of social media, I think it makes a big difference. And then the next thing I have under that category is digital resource work. Anytime you can use digital resources as for students to do some type of drill, or it may be something else, it may be some history work. I mainly automatically think of music theory and how we do work rhythms or note naming online, but there are a variety of other resources that you can use in your subject areas to do those things as well. Literacy strategies are sometimes, I don't know, people aren't sure about, do I have time to incorporate that into my class, and how would I do it? When I was first teaching in my first 5 years, I was in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, and we went through a reading process in my building to raise reading scores, and every teacher had a reading class for 20 minutes in the middle of the day. And I was petrified because I said, I mean, what do I know about teaching kids how to read? But I learned that we don't have to teach kids how to read. We can help literacy by incorporating reading within us in our classes. So what I have in these resources for you are resources that you can use for articles, music-based articles, biographies, current events in music and arts and dance and all of the different arts, and then some strategies, easy strategies to use to help kids break down those articles. So I think anytime we can use a current events article with a student, that's great. So we have so many out there in the entertainment industry that we can incorporate into our subject areas. I think this is a good piece to use as part of your lesson planning. I have an article there from the New York Times, and the New York Times, by the way, has an educational group, the New York Times Learning. And this was a great article that they talked about using music to inspire students to write. And so you can also take music articles or music or art, visual art, or watching a dance performance or watching a play or a monologue and have students write about that. On the next slide, I have elements to include like small group work, differentiating for ability, and learner choice and voice. In small groups, now is your time to figure out what can you do with students to collaborate with their fellow musicians. Like, can they practice in the neighborhood with kids that are in their neighborhood in the cul-de-sac and separate themselves? Other elements that I would include in that, if there are students that are practicing a scene together, maybe they're doing two people doing a scene together, can they collaborate somehow? One records themselves, the other records the response, and they somehow edit them together into a video that they could use as a project. In dance, can a couple of people record their different movements and they make one long dance or one dance, but each one of them has, say, 4/8 counts of movement that they incorporate. Normally, if we were in dance class, we'd put all those elements together and 3 people might dance together, but maybe they can videotape themselves, each performing their 4/8 counts, and then piece it together as part of a project. How can students work together in a small group in this kind of situation? And then differentiating for ability, I do think this is an opportunity. In my district, we have a day where we're going to be able to do small group meetings or one-on-one meetings with students virtually. So how can you do that and give students a private lesson, a private art lesson, tutor them on a scene, work with them on their dance movement? How can you do that utilizing that extra day that might be built into your school's plan? I offer a couple of resources like You Can Book Me and Calendly. Typically you do for meetings, but I think, well, I know our band director at my middle school has used that for students to sign up for after school tutoring. So now's a great time that you can use something like that to have students sign up, even for if you're able to do after school tutoring and do it virtually, they can sign up with you and you could do a Meet, a Zoom, a Canvas conference, whatever tool you're using. You could meet with them for 15 minutes and talk them through, a little mini private lesson in some way. Also, consider how you might modify your asynchronous lessons for students that have IEPs, 504s, or any other special situations that you may need to their work modified as to what you're giving to everyone. And I would urge you to remember that even students not on an IEP, students learn in very different ways. So consider anytime you can give them a choice of either presenting something or creating a project in a different way, or maybe students that might do well with written instructions might need visual instructions like a video instead. So consider all those things as you are making your lessons. And then under learner choice and voice, I have a variety of different choice boards that I completely pulled from other people. These are shared with me by great teachers. And there is a blog post at the end about using choice boards, specifically in music. I think choice boards are fabulous. And if you haven't used one before, consider starting now as a way to really give your kids choices in the different activities that they're doing throughout the week asynchronously. And even within a virtual meeting, you might be able to do that as well.
Felicia, I do have one dance teacher shared a choice board for dance that I can add into that and put it somewhere in this. Yeah, I'll find it and add it to this slide deck after we're finished.
Great. Okay, and on the next slide, I talk about collaboration and discussion, create in projects and PBLs, and student reflection. So think about all the ways your digital resources. This is a great spot to do that for using tools like Padlet, Seesaw, Class Dojo, or the discussion board options that you'll have in your LMS or Google Classroom, or even have students collaborate using Google Slides and Docs. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. When we collaborate with Google Slides and Google Documents, at my school, you have to lay out rules because kids will argue about who changed the background and somebody deleted all my stuff. But we start showing them that we can look at the revision history and we can figure out who changed what, and you're going to need to learn to work together. I think that is a great opportunity for students to learn how to work together. So anytime you do some type of collaboration or posting like this, you're going to want to tell kids what the rules are or what the expectation is and what is appropriate in posting in any of these areas. So make sure you have that stuff built in first. That sets students up to make the right choice. And if they do not make the right choice and they post something dorky or crazy or inappropriate, then that's an opportunity for them to learn what happens when they make a choice that's not good, and then allow them the opportunity to make it right and let them post appropriately. If you are not familiar with Seesaw and Class Dojo, those are both like almost like I just lost my words, portfolios, online portfolios for kids. Class Dojo has a discipline piece to it where you can give them dojos and take dojos. Seesaw is a little more secondary looking, and it is great. I've used it with my students, and several teachers at my school use it. Both Class Dojo and Seesaw are really nice for students to be able to have like a portfolio online. They naturally post within that, and they can see their work from one time of year to the next time. And it's real easy how that happens. It's very social media looking, but it's also very safe and locked down so that the general public doesn't get in and see students' work. Padlet, I offer you Padlet, but Padlet costs money. And I typically don't talk about stuff that costs money, but I love Padlet, and it is well worth the money to me because I use it a lot. Padlet is an online posting forum. It's $99 a year for a teacher account, and you have about 7 or 8 different ways you can post on Padlet. What I like about it is that students don't need an account, and they are able to post with me. I can observe what they're doing. I can moderate what they're doing so they can't post inappropriately. But it's just a nice extra tool for that type of thing. So consider using discussion boards and teaching kids how to post on a discussion board and then how to respond to peers. So think about things like that. This is a great time when we're doing so much virtual work to include discussion boards and teaching kids how to do it appropriately. And they will do it at the higher education level. So let's help them learn to do that. The PBLs that I have listed here, project-based learning, are just some resources and different ideas for these types of things. You may or may not have time to do something like this. It depends on your subject area, what level you're teaching, and what type of schedule you have been placed in with your district. but I do put these resources in here because I think they are really, really good, and it may give you some ideas of things that you can do as well. I also think that in the event you cannot have live concerts or even the ability to do a virtual concert the way you want, think of other things that you can do where students can share their learning and share their artwork, their performance in a different way. And a project-based learning option might be it, because it would be something you could share out with others. And then I think it's always good to have student reflection at the end of a lesson, or even the end of a unit, or the end of the week, and get feedback on students on how they felt they performed during the week. How did their lessons go? Was their learning good? I know during Q4, a lot of people checked in with students and asked, how are you doing? Because we were all worried about how everybody was doing with this craziness that Q4 was. So I don't think you should let go of that. I think you should continue to ask your students how they're doing, get an idea of where they're at and where they are in their learning, and build relationships with them that they feel comfortable saying, I was completely lost this week and now I feel like I'm a week behind. What can I do to catch up? I think that Flipgrid, if you're not using it already, is a fabulous tool for video reflection and all other types of performing. Flipgrid is a great tool for assessment for all of the performing arts and visual arts. You can use Padlet. Padlet students can upload a video, they can upload a picture, and they can type in it at the same time. So that's a great posting tool for reflection. Again, Seesaw and Class Dojo are as well. And Google Forms, if you've been using Google Forms, continue to use Google Forms. You can modify them for all types of reflection. So after you build your plan, you do need to consider your digital resources. I say to consider them carefully because we really have so many digital resources right now. It's very overwhelming. It's certainly overwhelming for students. So consider maybe starting the year with a few digital resources that you use regularly, and those should probably be your favorites that you are most comfortable with, and then integrate them in with your students. And then as you are going through week by week, you may add additional resources as you feel like they are good for your kids. What I do also suggest is that you find a way to organize them. Maybe that's on your website. Maybe you have a page for that. Two great tools that are popular now and very easy to use are Wakelet and Toby. Toby is a Google product. It is not on iPad or mobile based at all. It's all browser based right now. Wakelet, can't talk about that enough. Free, free, free. Anything that's this free and this good, you should be using. So I recommend Wakelet very highly. You not only use it for your resources and bookmarks or bookmarks of your resources, but you can also use it as a lesson delivery tool. So it is great that you could put a whole lesson in it, videos, pictures, text, links, and then give that one link to your students through Google Classroom, or you can get an embed link of Wakelet and you can embed it within Canvas so that it's dynamic live in Canvas, and probably other LMSs as well. So if you only leave this session with a couple of tools, Wakelet probably should be one of them. And then my highest recommendation for everybody is that you utilize your community. Certainly our arts education information from DPI is fabulous. And you can see today you've got a great team. We've got a great team to rely on. And I'm so grateful for all these webinars that they have put together to share with us. And we should rely on them as much as possible throughout this year, because that's a great support to have. If I'm sure most of y'all are already in some Facebook groups, continue to be a part of Facebook groups that help you have a group of people, kind of like a little miniature PLC, but yet it may be people all over the state, all over the region, all over the world. The Facebook support groups for educators are phenomenal. You can get great resources from people all over. And personally, if you're not on Twitter, I urge you to get a Twitter, and you don't have to tweet anything, just read it. I get some of the most phenomenal lesson ideas and resources from Twitter, and I just mainly read it. So if you were to start following me on Twitter, you would notice I do not post very much, but boy, I read it to death. So what I've linked here is it's a SMORE resource. It's like an online flyer of a lot of people in the arts to follow on Twitter. So it's a place to get you started, and it's all different areas of the arts. I also list blogs here. I have a great many blogs that I love, and so I rely on them very highly. And so I've linked a few in there for you. I've also linked some that are general. Ditch That Textbook is my absolute favorite general resource for information. They consistently have great resources for Google products and tons and tons and tons and tons of lesson ideas. And then I gave a few lesson resources there. If you're not using PBS Learning Media, their arts section, you should be. And the Kennedy Center educator section of their website has been revamped. It used to be called Arts Edge, and now it's just their educator source. And they have a lot of lesson plans and educator resources in that as well. I urge you to get in your communities, the people within your district, people on Twitter and Facebook, follow educators, follow musicians, follow arts institutions, and you will get so much information. I feel like the best thing that happened in education lately is the social media aspect that teachers have of sharing with each other and receiving all of that. And I'll tell you something, I'm not ashamed to borrow from my friends, and I really appreciate all the educators that shared resources that I could give to you today. So that is my basic how to put together a lot of lesson plans and work your lesson plans during this time of this strange and crazy schedule. But the next slide, I just want to hand you this one resource that I literally found on Twitter, or I didn't find. My friend Amy, my colleague Amy, sent to me. I started following this lady immediately. So at Magical Miss Murphy is an high school language arts teacher in California, and she shared her first week of school digital stations resource, and I have shared that with you in here. This is phenomenal to give you ideas for how to start the beginning of the year with students, getting to know them. And you are probably teaching 2, 3, or 4 days with them. This slide deck can be used as a part of your live instruction as well as your asynchronous instruction during the first week. And I think this is one of the best resources I've seen in a while. And I'm telling you, get on Twitter, get on your social media and get resources from people, because I never would have met Miss Murphy from California, who teaches high school language arts, to see a resource this great. Not been able to connect on social media. So she also looks like a great person to start following as well. So thanks to my colleague Amy, and thanks to Miss Murphy for letting us share it. So in closing, for me, here's what I have to say to you. I literally am no expert, but I get out there and I dig around for the teachers in my building and the arts educators in my district. And I just want you to know that you're not alone. And me connecting with you today, the fact that you're in this webinar, if there is anything in the world I can do for you, I hope you're going to email me and ask. The arts educators in my district love to collaborate, and I hope you will perhaps get in touch with us in Mooresville, and we would love to work with you. I hope some of these resources have been something that you can use this week. And again, hang in there. We are going to be amazing this fall. I know it. Our students are going to receive the best arts education of any state in the United, and that's going to be in North Carolina.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Felicia. That was absolutely amazing for everybody to listen to. I was learning so much as we were going through that as well. This brings us to our closure for today's session. Remember that we will have it recorded, and we will be uploading the recording to our webinar archive. If you and you have a copy of the slide deck to go back to at any point. You will get that in your email reminder as well. Really quickly, as we're wrapping up, we're going to go to that next slide. We'd like to just take a moment to reflect on what you got out of today's session. What are you excited about? What are you going to try to do or just try out moving forward? Type some of the ideas into the chat to share and motivate your peers. We will be sending you a Google form also to submit any great ideas you come up with to share with other arts educators. There's a running list of ideas shared that you will be able to view as well. Keep a lookout for that in your follow-up email. So go ahead and think for a moment and share those fantastic ideas of what you're excited about or what you're going to try to do now. I'm going to read a few things out. So much to absorb. Let's go back to these and explore these links, the 5 E's, having people to connect and share with. So much great info to sort through. The Wakelet, lots of useful tools, Flipgrid, Class Dojo, lesson plan templates. Let's see. Oh, you don't have to talk the whole time or discuss when doing synchronous learning. Fantastic. Art choice boards, planning out lessons, student reflection, all kinds of really great things. Joining Twitter, Flipgrid. Fantastic. I love seeing all of these things that you all have grasped today and things that you are getting. We're going to go ahead and move on here. You can keep putting those things in the chat. They will all be stored in our webinar later. But I'm going to go ahead and send you now the link to your survey. So it's right there, that form. I'll send that one more time with the word survey, just so that you know which one it is. And you can click on that survey, and it'll, at the end of that, will give you your certificate for today's CEU. And then
I just want to jump in really fast because I get emails about this over and over and over. Yeah. When you submit your survey, there is a screen that pops up that says, "Thank you for submitting your survey." And in that is a link that actually takes you to your PD certificate. So please click on that, copy it, paste it into another tab. That actually takes, you have to take it from that "Thank you for filling out your survey" screen. And that's how you actually get your PD certificate.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brandon. So once again, I said there was a link if you wanted to share some remote lesson plans that you have. You can share that in this Google Doc here. And if you want to look at some others that have been shared, we will provide that link next as well. So you can go in there at any point. We're trying to collect these from all of our webinars. So you can go to that at any point. Go ahead and fill that survey out. Like we said, we'll get to this last slide. There's our emails. If you have any questions or you want to brainstorm or talk about specific things for your classes or your needs, go ahead and send us an email. We are happy to brainstorm and help you with whatever we can. And we really hope to see you at some of our further webinars upcoming in the next few weeks. Thank you so much for attending today's session. Feel free to reach out to us at any point. We love hearing from you and working with you. We hope to see more of you at our future webinars. Take care, have a great rest of your day, and happy planning. And we will stay on for just a couple more minutes. If anybody does have specific questions, you are welcome to either put that in the chat or just unmute and ask us. We're happy to stay on for a couple minutes.